66 million years ago, the Earth was ruled by giants. Colossal predators, towering herbivores, and creatures of unimaginable size dominated every forest, river, and sky. For over 100 million years, nothing challenged their reign. Until the day the world changed forever. In an instant, a rock from space struck the planet with unimaginable force. Forests ignited, oceans boiled, the sky darkened, and an entire age of life was wiped from existence. The rulers of the Mesozoic were gone. The Earth was silent. And yet, in the shadows of extinction, a new kind of life stirred. Small, fragile, and underestimated, mammals survived where giants fell. They were not fast, not strong, not fearsome, but they were patient. They endured, they adapted, and from their hidden world, they would rise to inherit the Earth. This is the story of survival, of transformation, of a world reborn from the ashes. This is the story of how mammals, and eventually humans, rose from the shadows to take over the planet the dinosaurs once ruled. Stay with us, because what happened after the dinosaurs is not just history. It is the dawn of everything that followed. The final day of the dinosaurs. 66 million years ago, the world was alive with giants. The air was thick and heavy with the scent of vegetation, and the thunder of footsteps echoed through the primeval forests of a world still young. Dinosaurs ruled every corner of the planet. They were the masters of the Mesozoic, vast, untouchable, eternal. In the skies, pterosaurs rode the warm currents above tropical seas. On land, predators like Tyrannosaurus rex hunted with ruthless precision, while colossal herbivores like Triceratops and Ankylosaurus shaped the very landscape with their movement. Life was abundant, powerful, unchallenged. It had been this way for over 160 million years. To every living creature beneath the sun, it must have seemed as though the age of dinosaurs would never end. But above the blue sky, beyond the thin veil of atmosphere, something ancient and indifferent was moving toward Earth. A wanderer from the void. A rock 10 kilometers wide, traveling faster than a bullet. It had been drifting through space for eons, and now, by chance or by fate, its path crossed ours. When it struck the Yucatan Peninsula, the world changed in an instant. The sky became fire. The oceans rose in walls of water hundreds of meters high. Mountains of stone turned to vapor, and the very air burned. The blast released the energy of 1 billion nuclear bombs. Everything within 1,000 miles was obliterated instantly. But the true killer came after. The impact threw billions of tons of dust and molten rock into the atmosphere, forming a shroud that blotted out the sun. Darkness fell, not for hours, but for months. Temperatures plunged, plants withered, photosynthesis stopped. The food chains of the world collapsed. And one by one the great empires of the Mesozoic perished. The mighty dinosaurs, rulers of the Earth for over 100 million years, fell silent. Their bones would one day sleep beneath stone, but their reign was over. Yet, life is resilient. Even in the darkest moments of extinction, it clings to survival. Beneath the scorched surface, in burrows and shadows, small creatures trembled, but endured. They were mammals, furry, warm-blooded, and utterly insignificant in the age that had just ended. They had lived in fear of giants, scavenging, hiding, living small, unnoticed lives in the undergrowth. But now, the giants were gone. The Earth lay in ruins. But for the first time in over 100 million years, the world belonged not to the colossal, but to the cunning. The age of dinosaurs had ended, and from the ashes of their extinction, a new age was about to begin. The age of mammals. Shadows in the ash, the survivors. The world after the impact was silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of emptiness. A silence born from loss. Forests had burned to ash. Oceans had turned murky and lifeless. The skies, once blue and bright, were gray and cold. For years, sunlight barely reached the ground. 3/4 of all species on Earth were gone. Yet even in this desolation, life persisted. Among the ruins of the old world, the small, the adaptable, and the invisible survived. Before the asteroid struck, mammals had been little more than background characters in the grand drama of the dinosaurs. They were small, nocturnal, and timid. They crept through the underbrush, emerging only at night to feed on insects, roots, and fallen fruit. They had fur to keep them warm, sharp senses to stay alert, and a hunger that knew no arrogance, only survival. And it was those very traits that saved them. In a world plunged into darkness, large creatures needed more food than the land could give. But the mammals needed little. They could live off scraps, off what others ignored. They burrowed deep into the ground, where the air was warm and the chaos above was distant. They scavenged the dead, ate seeds and insects, and outlasted the endless winter that followed the impact. When most reptiles froze or starved, the mammals endured, their warm blood keeping their hearts alive. When others waited for the sun to return, they hunted by scent and touch, their keen hearing guiding them through the endless night. Species like Didelphodon, fierce, opossum-like creatures with sharp teeth and sharp minds, became some of the first predators of this new world. The multituberculates, small gnawing mammals, fed on seeds and nuts, adapting with speed that evolution rewarded. They were not our ancestors, not yet, but they carried the blueprint. Warm-blooded resilience, a brain that could learn, a heart that refused to surrender. Years turned to centuries. The skies cleared. Ash settled into the soil, and rain brought the first signs of green back to the land. In those moments, beneath fallen logs and inside crumbling burrows, the mammals stirred again. They had survived the apocalypse. Now, they would begin to rebuild the world. The forests would regrow. The rivers would run clear once more, and from the tiny survivors of a dying age would come the next chapter in the story of life. But for now, they were still small, creatures of shadow, living in a fragile dawn. They didn't yet know it, but they were the future, the heirs of a planet waiting to be reborn. The earth had been cleansed by fire, and in that terrible cleansing, a new opportunity had been forged. The survivors, the mammals, had not just lived through extinction. They had inherited a broken world, and they would reshape it forever. The Green Dawn years turned to decades, decades to centuries, and slowly the world began to heal. The fires burned out, the sky cleared, rain fell again, soft, steady, cleansing. It washed the ash from the land, and from that poisoned soil, green began to return. First came the ferns and mosses, ancient plants whose spores drifted like dust over the silent earth. Then came the trees, palm-like pioneers, followed by flowering plants that painted the landscape in color once more. The earth was no longer a grave, it was a garden, reborn. This was the Paleocene, a new epoch, a new world. The air was warmer now, the nights calmer, and the chaos of extinction slowly gave way to balance. And in this reborn world, the mammals emerged from the shadows. They were still small, still cautious, but they were free. Free from the tyranny of the reptiles that had once ruled the land. For the first time in over 100 million years, no creature cast a shadow over them. The world was open. Every forest, every plain, every river was a blank canvas, and nature began to paint again. The survivors diversified. In the dense forests of what would one day be North America, small, shrew-like creatures darted through the undergrowth. In Europe and Asia, insect eaters gave rise to early primates, tiny, tree-dwelling creatures with grasping hands and forward-facing eyes. In South America, Others evolved into forms that would one day resemble the ancestors of armadillos and sloths. It was an age of experiments. Evolution, freed from the dominance of dinosaurs, was trying everything. Climbers, burrowers, swimmers, gliders, hunters. The mammals were no longer just survivors, they were innovators. Each new generation adapted to fill an empty niche. Where there had once been small raptors, now came agile predators with fur and warm blood. Where massive plant-eating dinosaurs once grazed, small hoofed mammals began to roam. The natural order had reset, and mammals were rising to take every role. Still, danger lingered. Crocodiles, snakes, and giant birds of prey filled the gaps the dinosaurs left behind. Predation was constant. But mammals, with their quick breeding and sharp intelligence, proved hard to eradicate. Every loss only strengthened what remained. With each passing million years, they grew bolder. Some grew larger, their legs longer, their teeth sharper, their senses more refined. Others turned to the trees, leaping, gliding, adapting to life above the ground. The first primates swung from branch to branch, their world a canopy of green. The earth was alive again. Rivers teemed with fish. Forests pulsed with the hum of insects. And in the shadows, the descendants of the survivors of the great extinction were multiplying, diversifying, and evolving into the creatures that would inherit the future. The Paleocene was the dawn after the storm. A quiet, fragile light after unimaginable darkness. And though the mammals did not yet know it, they were laying the foundations for a new age. An age where speed, intelligence, and adaptability would replace size and terror. The old world was gone forever. The new one, their world, had only just begun. Predators reborn. The forests of the Paleocene were lush and green. But beneath their calm canopy, a new tension had begun to stir. Life was thriving again, and with abundance came hunger. The hunters were returning. For millions of years, mammals had lived as prey. They ran, hid, and survived by avoiding notice. But now, the survivors of the apocalypse were changing. The hunted were becoming the hunters. As the Earth entered the Eocene epoch, around 56 million years ago, a new wave of evolution swept across the continents. The mammals had multiplied, and with them came fierce competition. The rules of life, birth, hunger, death, were being rewritten. Small carnivores appeared first, nimble, sleek, and intelligent. They hunted in packs, their senses sharpened by millions of years of survival in the dark. Their warm blood gave them stamina no reptile could match. They could run, chase, and hunt for hours. They were the ancestors of wolves, cats, and bears, and they would soon dominate the land. In this new age, size alone no longer guaranteed supremacy. Speed, coordination, cunning. These became the tools of power. Among the earliest apex predators was Hyaenodon, a beast whose skull was longer than a man's arm and whose jaws could crush bone as easily as snapping a branch. It stalked the open woodlands, its senses tuned to the faintest scent of blood. Even its stride carried purpose. Efficient, relentless. In the coastal plains of Asia roamed Andrewsarchus, a predator as large as a horse, with a skull massive enough to crush a turtle shell in a single bite. It was a mammal, yes, but one born from a world still haunted by reptilian shadows. These creatures were the proof of what evolution had become, a force no longer bound by the forms of the past, but free to create anew. And as the hunters evolved, so too did their prey. The herbivores grew larger, faster, more coordinated. Some took to herding, protection in numbers. Others developed hooves and long limbs to escape across open ground. Every adaptation sparked another in response. The dance of predator and prey, a rhythm as old as life itself, was being set to a new tempo. But this time, It was not instinct alone that guided the struggle. It was learning. The mammals began to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. How to hunt, where to hide, when to flee. Behavior became a weapon as powerful as tooth and claw. Sociality emerged, the pack, the family, the herd. Creatures began to cooperate, to think beyond themselves. For the first time, survival wasn't just a matter of strength, but of intelligence. And in this growing complexity, something extraordinary was happening. Brains were expanding. The mind itself was becoming an evolutionary tool. In the age of dinosaurs, life had been a contest of muscle and scale. Now, it was a battle of perception, of adaptation, a quiet war of wit and will. The world had recovered from its great destruction, but it had not gone back to what it once was. It had moved forward, and in this new world, the mammals had become the undisputed rulers of the land, not because they were the strongest, but because they were the smartest. The rise of giants. 50 million years had passed since the great extinction. The earth had healed, and life had not only returned, it had transformed. Forests once blanketed the world, but as climates shifted, vast grasslands began to spread across the continents. A new kind of plant, grass, appeared and multiplied, reshaping entire ecosystems. It was simple, unassuming, and yet unstoppable. And with the rise of grass came the rise of grazers and the rebirth of giants. From the small, timid survivors of the Paleocene emerged creatures of immense size and power. Evolution had begun to build big again. The air was alive with the thunder of hooves. On the open plains, early horses, no larger than dogs, galloped through the meadows, their hooves striking rhythm in the dawn light. In distant forests, the ancestors of elephants appeared, short, tusked, heavy-bodied creatures called Moeritherium, living along the rivers of Africa. In Asia, the world saw the rise of a true titan, Paraceratherium. Standing over 16 feet tall at the shoulder, it was the largest land mammal that ever lived. Its long neck reached the tops of trees, its sheer size protecting it from all but the boldest predators. When it walked, the ground seemed to move beneath it. For the first time since the dinosaurs, the earth trembled under the weight of giants. And yet, these were not mindless behemoths. They were warm-blooded, social, and adaptable. They nurtured their young, remembered migration routes, and adapted to landscapes that changed with every passing century. As herbivores grew, so too did the hunters. Evolution never allows peace for long. The predators of this age were fierce and cunning. Saber-toothed carnivores, their fangs like curved blades, stalked the plains. Large bear dogs and nimravids, ancestors to modern cats, became the new lords of the hunt. Each generation refined the art of predation. Each kill honed their craft. This was an age of balance, of scale and counterbalance, of abundance and competition. No longer the fragile survivors of catastrophe, mammals now ruled a thriving, pulsing planet. Across North America, herds roamed in endless migration. In Europe, dense forests echoed with the calls of primates. In the oceans, life was stirring once again. Life that would soon return to claim the sea as its own. The Cenozoic Earth was no longer a place of recovery. It was a place of conquest. The mammals had filled every corner, every niche, from the canopy to the grasslands, from the deserts to the mountains. But evolution never rests. Just as it had driven dinosaurs to dominance and then swept them away, it continued to mold, to experiment, to push forward. Now it would send some of these new rulers back to where all life began, into the waters of the deep. For the next great chapter in the story of the mammals would unfold not on land, but beneath the waves, masters of the sea and sky. The Earth's story does not end on land. Life has always sought every corner of the planet, and the mammals were no exception. While the forests and plains were filled with giants, the oceans waited for new rulers. Some land-dwelling mammals began to explore the water, feeding in shallow rivers and coastal areas. Over millions of years, this journey back into the sea would transform them completely. These early pioneers were the ancestors of whales, creatures that traded their legs for flippers, their lungs and warm-blooded metabolism, allowing them to conquer the depths. Among them was Basilosaurus, a serpentine predator that could reach nearly 20 meters in length. Its massive jaws were filled with sharp teeth capable of crushing fish and even smaller whales. For the first time since the oceans were dominated by reptiles, mammals ruled the seas. On land, other mammals discovered the skies. Bats, the only mammals capable of powered flight, emerged as nocturnal hunters, taking insects in swift, precise maneuvers. They learned to navigate the dark with echolocation, filling a role no bird could dominate. Mammals were no longer confined to one environment. They were mastering every world they touched. From towering land giants to stealthy predators of the forests, to the hunters of the night sky, to the rulers of the oceans, mammals had become a planetary force. Each innovation sparked new possibilities. Where once evolution had been constrained by reptilian supremacy, it now had free rein. And with that freedom came diversity. Every niche, every ecosystem was filled by creatures shaped by survival, intelligence, and adaptability. It was an age of experimentation on a global scale. Whales would evolve into creatures larger than any dinosaur. Bats would soar through the night, pollinating flowers and controlling insect populations. Land mammals continued to diversify into species that would one day become horses, rhinos, and elephants. But dominance was not permanent. Even in this flourishing world, climate shifted, continents drifted, and glaciers began to creep toward the poles. Mammals were adapting again, not only to survive but to thrive in extremes. The Cenozoic had become an era of giants, hunters, and explorers. Every continent, every ocean, every sky was now their domain. The Earth had been reshaped in their image, and their story was far from over. For the next great challenge awaited. A world of ice and fire, of survival against staggering odds, where only the clever, the strong, and the resilient would endure. And in that crucible of hardship, a lineage would rise that would change the Earth in ways no other mammal ever had. The Age of Ice and Intelligence. As millions of years passed, the Earth's climate began to shift once more. Temperatures fell, glaciers advanced, and ice sheets stretched toward the equator. The lush forests and endless grasslands that had nurtured the rise of mammals were replaced by tundras, open plains, and frozen landscapes. The world was entering the Pleistocene, the Age of Ice, and survival would become a test of endurance, strength, and intelligence. On the vast cold plains of the north, woolly mammoths roamed. Their thick coats, long tusks, and massive size protected them from predators and the harsh winds. Saber-toothed cats, with their curved, dagger-like fangs, stalked silently through snowdrifts, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Giant ground sloths and enormous bears lumbered across forests and glaciers alike, carving out a place for themselves in this harsh, frozen world. Yet, among these giants, a small and fragile species emerged, one that would change everything. From the forests of Africa came the first humans. Not the rulers of the earth yet, but a species unlike any before, creatures capable of reason, planning, and imagination. These early humans carried fire, crafted tools, and began to manipulate their environment. They hunted in coordinated groups, shared knowledge across generations, and developed strategies that allowed them to thrive in environments far colder and harsher than any other mammal could endure. The Age of Ice was not kind. It demanded endurance, ingenuity, and intelligence. And those who survived were not always the strongest, but often the cleverest. While mammoths and saber-tooths represented physical power, humans represented a new form of dominance, one based on thought, foresight, and adaptation. They built shelters, learned to track prey over vast distances, and formed communities that could outlast the harshest winters. It was in this frozen crucible that the true power of mammals became evident. Not merely their size, speed, or strength, but their capacity to innovate, to learn, and to survive. Across the continents, mammals adapted to ice and cold in countless ways. Fur grew thicker, fat layers increased, and behaviors changed. Migration patterns, hibernation, and social cooperation became crucial. Evolution was no longer just physical, it was behavioral. It was shaping the mind as much as the body. The stage was set for the greatest transformation of all. From the shadows of extinction, mammals had risen. From small nocturnal survivors, they had conquered the land, sea, and sky. Now, some were beginning to shape the very world around them, using intelligence as their ultimate tool. The age of ice was harsh, unforgiving, and relentless. But it was also the proving ground for a species that would soon dominate the planet. A species that would rise not through claws, tusks, or teeth, but through mind, culture, and ingenuity. The story of mammals was nearing its culmination. From apocalypse to dominance, from survival to mastery, they had endured, adapted, and evolved. And from the icy plains of the Pleistocene, humanity would emerge to inherit the Earth. The new dominant species, 66 million years ago. Mammals were small, timid creatures, living in the shadows of giants. They hid beneath ferns, burrowed beneath the earth, and survived by avoiding notice, feeding on scraps, and waiting for a world that would one day belong to them. Today, those shadows are gone. The dinosaurs, once rulers of every land, sea, and sky, exist only in fossilized memory. Mammals, the tiny survivors of a cataclysm, now dominate the Earth in every form. From the smallest shrew to the largest whale, they inhabit every corner of the planet. They run, they swim, they fly, they hunt, they herd, they plan, they build. Life has been transformed in their image. Among mammals, one lineage has risen above all others. Humans, the species capable of shaping fire, bending metal, and constructing civilizations that stretch across continents. With tools, language, and imagination, humans altered landscapes, rivers, forests, and oceans. They became architects, inventors, conquerors, and explorers, changing the very face of the planet in a way no other creature had. Yet, this dominance is fragile, fleeting. The story of life is a story of change. The dinosaurs ruled for over 160 million years, and they too were toppled by forces beyond their control. Mammals have ruled for just a fraction of that time, and yet, in that short span, they have reshaped the Earth completely. History teaches us that no reign is eternal. The Earth belongs not to a single species, but to life itself, ever evolving, ever adapting, ever changing. And so, the story comes full circle. From the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, to the tiny mammals hiding in the shadows, to the towering giants of land and sea, and finally, to humans, creators, destroyers, and dreamers. The Age of Mammals is more than survival. It is a testament to resilience, adaptation, and intelligence. It is the story of how life, even after near annihilation, can rise, diversify, and conquer every challenge. But perhaps the most profound lesson of all is that life never stops evolving. The Earth will continue to change, species will rise and fall, and one day, the humans who now dominate may themselves become shadows in the fossil record. Yet the mammals endure. From the day after the dinosaurs, to the green dawn, to the icy plains, to the age of intelligence and civilization. They have carried the spark of life forward. This is the story of destruction and rebirth, of survival against impossible odds, of how mammals, small and fragile in the age of giants, rose from the shadows to become the masters of the earth. It is a story that continues today and will continue long after we are gone. Life is unstoppable. Life endures. And the mammals, and humanity itself, are proof of that enduring legacy. From the ashes of a world ruled by giants, life found a way. Small, unassuming mammals survived where the mighty fell. Over millions of years they grew, adapted, and transformed. From timid creatures in the shadows to rulers of land, sea, and sky. And among them, one species would rise to change the planet forever. Humans, inheritors of resilience, intelligence, and curiosity, carrying forward the legacy of survival against impossible odds. The story of life is not finished. The Earth will continue to change, species will rise and fall, and new chapters will be written in the grand saga of life. This is more than history. It is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, life endures, it adapts, it survives, and perhaps, in the future, we too will be remembered as part of this story. A brief spark in the endless march of evolution. If this journey through time captivated you, if the story of survival and transformation inspired you, then don't stop here. Subscribe, so you never miss a journey into the incredible story of life on Earth. Like, share, and join us as we uncover the mysteries of the past. And imagine the wonders of the future. Because the story doesn't end with the dinosaurs. It continues. In every creature, every ecosystem, and in every one of us.